When I first joined the company, I thought I had finally made it. It was one of those dream jobs, great pay, modern office, fancy coffee machines, and people who actually smiled when you passed them in the hallway. I had worked hard for years to get to this point, climbing from one corporate ladder to another. The offer letter had felt like a reward for every late night and every time I stayed at the office when others went home. I had no idea that behind those glass walls and cheerful smiles, something rotten was waiting to swallow me whole. My position wasn't anything flashy. I wasn't an executive or someone who made headlines. I was just a senior project manager, good at what I did, with a small team that trusted me. We were the backbone of a billion-dollar tech company that was about to go public. The IPO was all anyone could talk about. People were buying new suits, talking about their future stocks, and planning early retirements. It was exciting. The company was glowing with confidence, and I could feel the energy every day when I walked in. Then one morning, everything changed, starting with a woman who walked into the building like she owned it. Her name was Serena. She wasn't on any department list, she had no assigned desk, and no one seemed to know her title. But the moment she appeared, whispers started. Someone said she was close to the CEO. Another said she was some sort of consultant. But no one had ever seen her do any consulting. What everyone did see, though, was how quickly she was promoted, how people who questioned her suddenly went quiet, and how even the senior executives treated her like she was untouchable. At first, I stayed out of it. Office politics never interested me. I focused on my work, tight deadlines, product testing, and preparing for the IPO launch. But that changed one afternoon when my manager called me into his office. His face looked tight, like he had been forced into something he didn't want to do. He said, "You'll be training Serena for the next few weeks. The CEO personally requested it." I blinked. Training her for what role exactly? He looked down at his desk and said quietly, "Just make sure she understands your team's workflow and project management tools. Do your best." I knew then that something wasn't right. People didn't just get assigned training with no position or reason, especially not with the CEO's personal request. Still, I tried to stay professional. I met with Serena the next day, introduced her to the basics, and offered to show her how our internal system worked. But from the very first hour, it was clear she had no interest in learning. She spent most of the session scrolling through her phone, asking questions that had nothing to do with the job, and occasionally dropping comments about how boring the work seemed. By the end of the second day, she showed up 2 hours late, carrying an expensive handbag that probably cost more than my monthly rent. When I reminded her about the meeting schedule, she smirked and said, "I don't really do mornings." That night, I sent my manager a polite email saying it might be better if someone else took over the training since she didn't seem very engaged. I didn't think it would be a big deal. I was wrong. The next morning, HR called me in. 3 people were sitting there, my manager, the HR director, and a woman from the executive office. They didn't waste time. The HR director said, "We've received feedback that you've been uncooperative and disrespectful toward a new executive trainee." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Uncooperative? I did everything I was told. I just said she might need a different training approach. But they didn't care. My manager wouldn't even look me in the eye. The HR director's tone was cold. "Going forward, we expect full compliance with all assignments. You're expected to continue training her." I walked out of that room stunned. My heart was pounding. It wasn't just unfair, it was humiliating. But I decided to stay quiet and do my job. I needed the paycheck, and I didn't want trouble, especially with the IPO just weeks away. Then, 3 days later, I opened my company payroll portal and froze. My monthly salary had dropped by $3,200. No warning, no explanation. Just gone. I thought it was an error. So I emailed HR. No reply. I called payroll. They said it was an adjustment, approved by upper management. My stomach turned. I knew whose name was behind it. That afternoon, Serena walked past my desk wearing a designer dress and smiled at me like she knew something I didn't. Then she leaned close and whispered, "Maybe next time, don't make things difficult for people the CEO likes." It felt like ice ran through my veins. I wanted to say something, to fight back, but one look around the office told me everything. No one was going to help. People who once chatted with me in the break room now avoided eye contact. Even my closest coworkers told me to just let it go. But letting it go wasn't an option. I had rent, bills, and a family depending on me. So, I decided to gather proof. Quietly, I started keeping records, emails, messages, everything. The more I looked, the more I found. Serena wasn't just getting paid more than senior staff. She had access to restricted documents, internal financial files, and upcoming IPO plans. She wasn't training. She was being positioned as something else entirely. And the CEO, he was covering it up. Every day felt like walking on broken glass. I pretended everything was normal while inside. I was burning with anger. I knew what this meant. If I pushed too far, I could lose everything. But if I stayed silent, I'd be part of something corrupt. Then one night, while staying late at the office, I saw something that made my heart stop. Serena was in the CEO's office, lights dimmed, standing over his desk with a folder labeled IPO Confidential. When she noticed me, she didn't even look surprised, just smiled slowly, like she was daring me to say something. That was the moment I realized how deep this went. The company's billion-dollar IPO wasn't just a business deal. It was built on lies, manipulation, and power games that could destroy people's lives. And when the truth finally came out, it did destroy everything. But that's the part you won't believe. How one decision, one refusal to play along, brought down an entire empire. I'll tell you exactly how it happened. But first, let me tell you what happened the next morning when the CEO himself called me into his office. When I got the message that the CEO wanted to see me, my stomach dropped. His assistant called early in the morning, her voice calm and polite, but the tone underneath said everything. It wasn't a request. I tried to stay composed as I walked toward the executive floor. The hallway there always felt different, quieter, like even the air cost more money. Every step echoed against polished marble. His office door was half open, and I could see him standing by the window, overlooking the city skyline. He didn't turn around when I entered. For a moment, I thought maybe I should just walk out. But before I could say anything, he spoke. "You've been making waves, haven't you?" His voice was smooth, practiced, the kind that could sell anything. I took a deep breath and said, "I'm just doing my job, sir." He turned then, smiling in a way that didn't reach his eyes. "Doing your job shouldn't mean upsetting people who are helping this company succeed." I didn't respond. He motioned for me to sit, but I stayed standing. My heart was pounding, but I didn't want to show it. He walked closer, lowering his voice. "Serena told me you've been uncooperative. That's disappointing. I had high expectations for you." I wanted to scream that none of it was true, that I had only tried to train her properly. But something in his tone told me it didn't matter. His mind was already made up. I said carefully, "Sir, I've been professional in every interaction. If there's any issue, I'd be happy to clarify." He smiled again, almost amused. "No need. Just remember, loyalty matters here. We're days away from an IPO worth over $1 billion. I need people who can follow directions, not question them." There it was, a warning disguised as advice. He wasn't asking for my loyalty to the company, he was asking for silence. After that meeting, everything changed. My projects were reassigned, meetings were held without me, and my access to certain files was quietly removed. It was like I had been erased but still expected to show up every day. People looked at me with sympathy but said nothing. I realized then how much power fear had in that building. But I couldn't stop thinking about what I had seen that night, the folder marked IPO Confidential, the way Serena handled it like she owned the place. Something about it didn't sit right. If she had access to confidential financial documents, it meant she was more than just a trainee. It meant she was directly involved in something much bigger than anyone knew. I started asking quiet questions, nothing direct, just casual conversations in the break room or after meetings. A few coworkers hinted that Serena's name had appeared on some internal emails tied to IPO restructuring, but no one knew what that meant. One analyst I trusted finally told me in a whisper, "They're moving assets fast. Something's off about the numbers." That one sentence kept replaying in my head. Moving assets? Fast. That wasn't normal, not this close to a public offering. I started going through old project data I still had saved, checking budgets, reports, and forecasts. Some figures didn't match up. Revenue projections were inflated. Expenses disappeared from reports. And a few documents were signed by Serena herself, even though she technically didn't hold any official title. The deeper I looked, the more uneasy I felt. It was like pulling a thread and realizing the whole fabric was coming apart. I knew I was taking a risk. Every file I opened left a digital footprint. If anyone found out, I'd be finished. But I couldn't stop. Late one evening, I stayed back again, pretending to finalize a project update. Most of the floor was empty, the lights dimmed. I logged into a restricted finance folder I had once managed before they revoked my access. To my surprise, the system didn't block me, it opened. Either someone forgot to remove my clearance, or someone wanted me to see what was inside. Inside the folder were a series of transaction reports labeled with strange codes. The dates matched the weeks leading up to the IPO. I clicked one, and what I saw made my hands shake. Massive transfers, millions of dollars, had been redirected to consulting firms that didn't exist. The names were fake, the signatures sloppy, and one of the authorization initials was SL Serena Lewis. I stared at the screen for a long time. It was fraud, plain and simple. The kind that could destroy a company's entire public offering if exposed. Just then, I heard footsteps behind me. My heart raced as I quickly closed the screen and minimized the window. It was the night janitor pushing a cleaning cart, smiling kindly as he passed. But even after he left, my hands were still trembling. I packed my things and left, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been watching me. The next day, things got stranger. Serena didn't show up for work, and no one seemed to know where she was. Rumors spread fast. Some said she was out sick. Others said she'd been flown overseas for urgent business. I knew better. Something was happening behind closed doors. Then, out of nowhere, I got an email from an anonymous sender. No subject line, no message, just an attachment labeled proof. For a second, I thought it might be spam or some phishing scam. But curiosity won. I opened it on a secure device, and what I saw made my heart sink. It was a scanned document, a financial statement, showing millions moved offshore under Serena's authorization, with the CEO's digital signature beneath it. I sat back in my chair, feeling like the room was spinning. This wasn't just office drama anymore. This was criminal. That evening, as I drove home, I kept replaying everything. The CEO's warning. Serena's smug smile. The salary cut. It was all connected. They had punished me not because I refused to train her, but because I saw too much. Because I wasn't part of their plan. But what could I do? Reporting it to HR was useless. They worked under the same executives. Going public could ruin me. Still, I knew if I stayed silent, I'd be protecting people who didn't deserve protection. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, wondering how many other employees had been silenced like me. I remembered how proud I'd been to join this company, how I thought it stood for innovation and integrity. And now, I was realizing it was built on greed and lies. The next morning, when I arrived at the office, my ID badge didn't work. The security guard looked confused and made a call. After a few minutes, he said, "HR wants to see you." I walked to their office, my pulse quickening. Inside, the HR director waited with 2 security personnel beside her. Her face was blank, rehearsed. "Your employment has been terminated effective immediately," she said. "You'll receive an email outlining your severance." I didn't even argue. I just looked at her and asked quietly, was it because I refused to train her, or because I found out too much? She blinked but said nothing. That silence told me everything. As I packed up my desk, I noticed people pretending not to look. Some offered quick, sad glances. Others just stared at their screens, afraid to be seen talking to me. I carried the box to the elevator, my mind already spinning. I had proof. I had names, dates, and documents. I wasn't powerless anymore. But the timing couldn't have been worse. The IPO announcement was just 3 days away. Investors were already celebrating, stock prices were predicted to soar, and the CEO was about to become even richer. As the elevator doors closed, I looked at my reflection and whispered, "You wanted me quiet, but you have no idea what I'm about to do. Because if I couldn't stop them from inside the company, I'd find another way." And that's exactly what I did next, but I had no idea how dangerous it would become. Because before the IPO went live, someone tried to make sure I disappeared. After I left the building that day, I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the steering wheel. I should have felt angry or defeated, but what I really felt was disbelief. Years of work, endless overtime, dedication, and it had all been erased overnight. And for what? Because I refused to play along with their little secret. Because I had a conscience. The more I thought about it, the more it burned inside me. They wanted me silent, but silence was exactly what I couldn't give them anymore. That night, I went through every email, document, and file I had saved over the years. I hadn't realized how much I'd kept: backup reports, team messages, even screenshots from internal systems. Buried in those folders were pieces of something much bigger. Some documents showed duplicate expense claims, others listed consultants who didn't exist. I even found one contract signed by the CEO and Serena that allocated millions to a market research project that was never actually conducted. The money had just vanished. I stayed up till dawn piecing things together. The numbers told a story of manipulation, money being moved around to make the company's books look clean before the IPO. But that wasn't all. I also noticed names, board members, senior managers, all connected by strange payments or shell company links. The higher I looked, the messier it got. It wasn't just about Serena anymore. She was a piece of a much larger puzzle. By morning, my laptop screen was covered with open files and sticky notes. My head was pounding, but I knew I couldn't stop. I made copies of everything on a secure drive and locked it away. I didn't know who I could trust, but I knew I needed help. Someone who understood how to expose corporate fraud without getting crushed. That's when I thought of Ryan, an old friend from college who had become an investigative journalist. We hadn't talked in years, but I knew he'd still pick up my call. When he answered, his voice sounded surprised but warm. After a quick catch-up, I told him what had happened. He listened quietly until I mentioned the fake financial statements and the offshore transfers. Then he said, "You realize what you're describing could take down an entire corporation, right?" I said, "That's exactly what they deserve." He agreed to meet the next day at a small cafe downtown. I brought my laptop in the drive, and we sat in a quiet corner. Ryan went through the documents carefully, his expression growing more serious with each file. Finally, he looked up and said, "This isn't small-time corruption. If these documents are real, your CEO's in deep. And if he's about to take the company public, the SEC would tear this apart." Hearing that made my stomach twist. I had always seen the CEO as untouchable, a man who smiled on magazine covers and gave inspiring speeches about innovation and teamwork. But now I knew that behind that charm was greed powerful enough to destroy lives. Ryan told me he'd start verifying the data, but warned me to be careful. "If they find out you're talking to me," he said, "they'll try to make you look like the problem." I didn't realize how right he was until 2 days later. I started noticing a black SUV parked near my apartment. It wasn't always in the same spot, but it was always there. Once in the morning, once at night. No one got out, but the timing was too perfect to be random. Then strange things started happening. I'd get calls with no one on the other end. My email accounts would log me out unexpectedly, and one night, someone tried to open my car door while it was parked outside. I barely caught the sound before they ran off. I told Ryan about it, and he said we needed to move fast. He'd already confirmed parts of the financial trail. Some of the companies listed in the transactions were traced back to addresses linked to the CEO's private trust. But the real kicker was an internal memo he found online from an anonymous source inside the company. It mentioned immediate financial restructuring to secure investor confidence. The date on the memo: the same day my salary was cut. The realization hit hard. They'd been cleaning up the books for weeks, and anyone who got too close was being removed quietly. Meanwhile, the media was buzzing about the upcoming IPO. Every news outlet called it the most anticipated tech launch of the decade. Investors were throwing money in. None of them had any idea that the numbers they were betting on were fake. But I wasn't the only one starting to question things. A few of my old coworkers reached out in secret. One of them, Maya, had been working in finance and told me something strange had happened. "They made us destroy a set of audit reports," she whispered over the phone. "They said it was outdated data, but it didn't feel right." I met her that evening in a quiet restaurant. She looked nervous, glancing over her shoulder every few minutes. She handed me a small envelope with a USB inside. "These are backup files," she said. "The real ones. They show where the money was moved." I asked her why she was helping me, and she said softly, "Because this company used to mean something. And now it's just lies." I went home and opened the files. They confirmed everything. Massive transactions routed through shell accounts, all leading back to the same people. It was undeniable proof. I sent copies to Ryan, and he told me he was preparing the full report for publication. He wanted to cross-check everything before it went public, but the evidence was solid enough to start writing. Still, something didn't sit right. Serena had vanished too easily. For someone so connected to the CEO, she wouldn't just disappear without purpose. And then it hit me. What if she wasn't hiding? What if she was somewhere cleaning up the last traces of the fraud before the IPO? That thought wouldn't leave my head. I started digging into her digital footprint, searching for anything recent. One late night, I found something, an internal communication from an encrypted company network showing a file transferred to a private server overseas. The sender's name, Serena Lewis. The receiver, a company law firm managing the IPO. She was moving documents, not hiding them. The realization made my blood run cold. If those files contained falsified records, and she got them sealed under attorney privilege, no one would ever see the truth. The IPO would go through, the company would skyrocket, and the fraud would be buried under billions. The next morning, Ryan called me with urgency in his voice. "They're rushing the IPO date," he said. "It's happening tomorrow, not next week." That was when everything clicked. The early salary cuts, the fake reports, the vanishing employees, it was all a countdown. They were desperate to go public before anyone found out. I told him I was going to confront the CEO directly. He tried to stop me, saying it was too risky, but I couldn't just sit back anymore. If the IPO launched, all the evidence would be worthless. I had to face him before it was too late. As I drove toward the company headquarters that night, the streets looked emptier than usual. The building was still lit up, the top floor glowing like a crown. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I didn't have a plan, just anger, truth, and a flash drive full of evidence that could destroy a billion-dollar empire. But as I parked in the lot, I noticed something chilling. The same black SUV that had been near my apartment was now parked near the entrance. The engine was running. The headlights flickered once, like they knew I was there. I sat frozen, gripping the steering wheel, watching the doors of the SUV slowly open. And at that moment, I realized I wasn't the only one planning to confront someone that night. The air outside the building felt heavier that night. The glow from the tall glass windows reflected against my windshield as I sat there, trying to calm my heartbeat. The black SUV hadn't moved, and I could just barely see two silhouettes inside, one in the driver's seat, another in the back. For a moment, I thought about turning around and leaving. But then I remembered what they'd done, cutting my salary, firing me, trying to silence me. I couldn't back down now. Not when I was this close to exposing everything. I took a deep breath, grabbed the flash drive from my pocket, and stepped out of the car. The wind was cold, sharp against my face. The sound of my footsteps echoed in the near-empty parking lot. I walked quickly toward the side entrance, the one employees used after hours. My old access card wouldn't work, but I had another way in. A few nights before my termination, I'd noticed that one of the maintenance doors had a faulty latch. It didn't close properly, and security rarely checked it. I pulled it open just enough to slip inside. The building was quiet, almost too quiet. Only a few lights were on, and the hum of the air conditioning filled the empty space. Every step I took sounded louder than I wanted it to. I moved carefully through the hallway, heading toward the executive floor. That was where the CEO's office was, and where I knew the truth was being hidden. When I reached the elevator, I hesitated. The cameras were still there, little red dots blinking silently above the doors. I took the stairs instead. My legs burned as I climbed, but adrenaline pushed me forward. With each step, I thought about everything I had lost. My career, my reputation, my sense of peace, and now maybe even my safety. When I finally reached the top floor, the corridor lights were dimmed. The CEO's office door was closed, but faint light spilled from underneath. Someone was inside. I moved closer and heard voices, 2 of them. One was unmistakably his. Calm, confident, with that same rehearsed charm. The other voice, softer but sharp, made my heart stop. Serena. She was back. I pressed my ear closer to the door, trying to make out their words. The files have been transferred, Serena was saying. Everything's ready for tomorrow. The CEO replied, his tone low and certain. Good. Once the IPO hits, we'll be untouchable. No one will question the numbers once the stock starts climbing. You did well, Serena. There was a pause. Then she said, almost proudly, and what about him? The one who caused all this noise. He chuckled. He's already finished. No one will believe him now. We made sure of that. My stomach twisted. They were talking about me. I stood there frozen, my hand gripping the flash drive so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I should have been scared, but all I felt was anger. Every word confirmed what I already knew. They had planned everything. The lies, the manipulation, even my downfall. I wanted to burst through that door right then, but I forced myself to stay calm. I needed proof, something beyond what I already had. Something undeniable. Slowly, I backed away and took out my phone. I turned on the voice recorder and stepped closer again. Their voices came through clearer this time. Serena asked, and the transfers? The ones offshore. They'll be gone by sunrise, the CEO replied. Once the IPO launches, the money becomes invisible. Even the auditors won't find it. It was exactly what I needed to hear. The perfect evidence. I was about to slip away when the floor creaked beneath me. Both voices went silent. The next few seconds felt endless. Then I heard footsteps moving toward the door. My heart stopped. I looked around frantically for a place to hide and spotted a small alcove near a display cabinet. I ducked into it just as the door opened. The CEO stepped out, his eyes scanning the hallway. For a moment, his gaze swept right past me, but then he stopped. I held my breath. He took a slow step forward. Hello, he called, his voice calm but cold. Anyone there? I stayed still, barely breathing. He waited a moment longer, then turned back toward his office. Probably just security, he muttered. When the door closed again, I exhaled shakily. My hands were trembling as I checked the recording. It was still running. I had captured everything. But I knew I couldn't stay. If they caught me here, it would all be over. I turned toward the stairwell, moving as quietly as possible. But as I reached for the handle, I heard something that made me freeze again. Another pair of footsteps, this time coming from the opposite end of the hall. Slow, deliberate. Then I saw her. Serena. She was standing a few feet away, holding her phone and staring right at me. Her expression was calm, almost curious. Well, she said softly, I didn't expect to see you again. My mind raced for a response, but nothing came out. She stepped closer, her heels clicking against the floor. You really don't know when to quit, do you? She said, her tone laced with amusement. You should have taken the pay cut and stayed quiet. I took a step back, gripping the flash drive tighter. You think you can steal millions and no one will find out? She smiled faintly. Find out? Maybe. Prove it. That's another story. For a brief moment, neither of us moved. The air between us felt electric, charged with tension. Then, somewhere down the hall, I heard the elevator ding. She glanced toward it, and I took that second to slip into the stairwell. My heart pounded as I ran down the steps, skipping 2 at a time. When I reached the lower floor, I burst through the door and hurried toward the back exit. My breathing was ragged, my palms slick with sweat. I didn't know if she was following me, but I didn't look back. I pushed through the door and into the parking lot. The black SUV was still there, but now its headlights were on. I froze, unsure what to do. The driver's door opened, and a tall man in a suit stepped out. He looked directly at me, then spoke into a headset. He's here. Panic shot through me. I turned and ran toward the far end of the lot, clutching the flash drive and my phone. My shoes pounded against the pavement as the sound of footsteps followed behind. The air felt thick, my lungs burning as I tried to reach my car. I could see it just a few rows ahead. Then, suddenly, headlights flared behind me. The SUV was moving. Fast. I swerved out of the way, stumbling as the tires screeched. I dove behind a row of parked cars, my heart racing. The vehicle stopped a few feet away, the engine still running. I could hear muffled voices but couldn't make out the words. Then, after what felt like forever, the SUV slowly pulled out of the lot and disappeared down the street. I stayed crouched there for a long time, trying to steady my breathing. My mind was spinning. They knew I had the evidence. They knew I wasn't giving up. And now, they knew I was coming for them. When I finally got back into my car, I checked my phone. I had 3 missed calls from Ryan. When I called him back, his voice was tense. "Where are you? You need to get out of there now. They know you've got something. Someone's been trying to trace my network." I looked at the flash drive in my hand. "I've got the proof," I said. "I recorded them tonight. Everything." He paused for a second, then said quietly, "Then this just got a lot bigger." I started the car and pulled onto the empty road, the city lights flashing by. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked exhausted, but my eyes were burning with determination. Tomorrow, the IPO would go live. Billions were at stake. And by this time tomorrow, the world would either see the truth, or I'd be silenced for good. The clock was ticking, and I was running out of time. The road ahead was empty, just streaks of streetlights reflecting across my windshield as I drove through the city. My hands were tight around the steering wheel, my mind spinning faster than the tires. I kept checking the mirrors, half expecting that black SUV to reappear at any moment. My phone buzzed again, but I didn't answer. I needed a plan. I couldn't go home. It wasn't safe anymore. Whoever those people were, they were willing to do anything to keep this buried. I finally pulled into an all-night diner on the edge of town. It was the kind of place where no one asked questions. I sat in a corner booth, ordered black coffee, and plugged in my phone. My messages from Ryan kept popping up one after another. The last one made me stop reading. "Don't send anything yet," it said. "There's someone inside your company feeding them info. I don't know who." I leaned back, my heart racing again. Someone inside the company? Feeding information? That explained why they always seemed one step ahead. But who could it be? Maya? No, she risked her job to give me those files. My manager? Maybe. Or someone higher up who was keeping an eye on both sides. Just then, a new email appeared on my phone. No subject, no sender name, just one line in the body. "You don't know who you're dealing with." I stared at it for a long moment. The timestamp showed it had arrived just 2 minutes ago. My eyes darted toward the diner windows, scanning the parking lot. It was empty except for my car and a truck at the far end. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I finished my coffee, left a few bills on the table, and walked outside slowly, keeping my phone close. The cold air hit me hard, and the silence felt heavier than before. I started the car and drove toward a motel near the outskirts of town, somewhere I could lay low for a few hours and figure out my next move. When I checked in, the clerk barely looked up. The room was small, one bed, flickering lamp, thin curtains, but it felt safer than being on the street. I locked the door, placed my phone and laptop on the table, and backed up every file again, this time to a cloud account under a hidden alias. No matter what happened, I wasn't going to let this evidence disappear. It was around 3 a.m. when my phone rang again. This time it was Maya. Her voice was shaky, terrified. "You have to stop, please," she said. "They know about the files I gave you. They came to my apartment." My chest tightened. "What? Who came?" "I don't know," she whispered. "2 men. They said they were from internal security, but they weren't. They took my laptop, my phone, everything. I'm leaving town. You should too." Before I could reply, the call ended. I sat there in silence, the only sound being the faint hum of the heater. The fear in her voice wasn't something you could fake. I realized how deep this had gone. It wasn't just about money anymore, it was about survival. I got up and paced the room, trying to think. Every move I made seemed to trigger a response. Every step forward brought new danger. And now someone had leaked my involvement. That meant the walls were closing in fast. A few minutes later, Ryan called again. His tone was urgent. "Listen to me," he said. "Something's changed. I got a call from a source inside the board. They're not just hiding financial fraud, they're covering a failed acquisition. The IPO isn't just about raising money, it's about patching up a massive loss." I froze. "What kind of loss?" "Over 400 million, he said. "They tried to buy a startup overseas and it collapsed. They buried it under fake assets. And that's what Serena was brought in to help cover up. She wasn't just someone's favorite, she's the fixer. She's been moving funds and rewriting valuations to hide the gap before the IPO launches." I sank into the chair, feeling the weight of that number. $400 million. That explained everything. The panic, the secrecy, the manipulation. They weren't just trying to cheat investors. They were trying to save themselves from financial ruin. Ryan continued, "If that comes out, the IPO collapses instantly. But if it stays hidden, they walk away rich. That's why they can't let you talk." Before I could respond, the motel lights flickered. Once. Then again. I turned toward the window and saw a pair of headlights in the parking lot. My stomach twisted. I whispered into the phone, "Ryan, someone's here." "Get out," he said immediately. "Don't go near the door. There's a back exit through the laundry area in most motels. Use it." I grabbed my bag and the flash drive, shoved everything into my jacket, and slipped out the side. My footsteps were soft on the carpeted hallway, but my pulse was loud in my ears. I reached the back door and pushed it open just enough to peek out. The alley was dark but empty. I stepped outside, closing the door quietly behind me. My breath fogged in the cold air as I hurried toward the main road. Behind me, I heard the low sound of an engine starting. Then headlights turned toward the alley. I broke into a run. The night blurred around me. Empty streets, the sound of my own shoes hitting the pavement, the wind cutting against my face. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I didn't dare stop. I turned into a narrow side street, hiding behind a row of dumpsters. The car slowed at the corner, its engine rumbling. After a long minute, it drove past. I waited until the sound faded before pulling out my phone. A new message from Ryan was waiting. "They've hacked your cloud. Don't upload anything else. Meet me at the old press building at sunrise." I stared at the screen in disbelief. They were faster than I thought. Every time I tried to stay ahead, they were already there. I looked at the flash drive in my hand. It suddenly felt heavier, like it carried the weight of the entire truth, and my life along with it. By the time I reached the press building, the sky was turning pale gray. Ryan was already there, standing near the entrance, his laptop bag slung over one shoulder. He looked exhausted but focused. I handed him the flash drive without saying a word. He plugged it in, scanned through the files, and nodded. "This is it," he said quietly. "This is enough to stop them. But there's one more thing missing, proof that ties the CEO directly to the offshore accounts." I hesitated. "You think Serena has it?" He nodded slowly. "She's the only one who could. If she's still moving files, she's probably keeping her own insurance. A backup, just in case they turn on her." That made sense. Serena was smart enough to protect herself. If we could find her copy, we could end this once and for all. But finding her meant walking straight back into the danger I'd barely escaped from. As we planned our next move, a sudden sound echoed through the empty building, the click of a door shutting somewhere in the distance. Ryan and I froze. The air grew still. We weren't alone. Footsteps started approaching, slow, deliberate, echoing through the hallway. Then a voice called out, calm and familiar. "You should have stayed quiet," the voice said. It was the CEO. Ryan's eyes widened. He whispered, "How did he?" Before he could finish, the lights flickered again, and another shadow appeared behind him. A second voice joined in, soft and steady. "Put the drive on the table," Serena said. "You don't know what you're getting into." I turned slowly toward her, my pulse pounding in my ears. She looked different this time. Tired, maybe even scared, but her tone stayed cold. The CEO stepped closer, his expression calm, confident, as if this was just another meeting. "Let's make this simple," he said. "You give us what you took, and this ends tonight. No more chasing, no more threats." Ryan's hand hovered near his bag, where the flash drive was still plugged into his laptop. The tension in the room was thick, every second stretching like an hour. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. And then, without warning, Serena said something that changed everything. "You think he's the only one running this," she said, her eyes locking onto mine. "You have no idea how deep this goes." The CEO turned sharply toward her. "Serena!" But she didn't stop. "They'll destroy you too," she said, her voice trembling now. "This isn't just about the IPO. There's another deal, bigger than this one, and if it fails, they'll burn everything to the ground to cover it up." For a moment, the entire room fell silent. Even the CEO looked thrown off. Then his calm mask cracked just enough for me to see the truth. She wasn't lying. That was the second twist I never saw coming. It wasn't just about one corrupt CEO or a fake IPO. It was something larger, darker, and far more dangerous than I ever imagined. And as I stood there, trapped between the truth and the people who would kill to bury it, I realized the real story hadn't even begun yet. The silence in that abandoned press building was so sharp it almost hummed. Serena's words hung in the air, heavy and electric, as if they had cut through the very tension holding the room together. The CEO's face had turned pale, his jaw tight, eyes burning toward her. For the first time, he didn't look untouchable. He looked afraid. Ryan took a small step back, his laptop still on the table, the flash drive glowing faintly in the dim light. I could feel my pulse in my throat. "What do you mean there's another deal?" I asked, my voice low. Serena hesitated, glancing between me and the CEO. They made a deal with a government contractor overseas. Illegal kickbacks, hidden under fake subsidiaries. That's where the missing money went. If this comes out, the IPO doesn't just collapse. It takes down every investor connected to it. That's why they can't let you leave here. The CEO's voice snapped like a whip. Enough! He stepped forward, his tone controlled but his eyes sharp. "You've said too much already." He looked at me. "You think you're the hero here, exposing corruption? You're just a pawn in someone else's game. You leak that data, and you'll destroy innocent people too. Thousands of jobs, retirement funds, families. You'll burn everything down just to feel right." His words hit hard. For a second, doubt flickered in my mind. Could he be telling the truth? Was blowing this open going to hurt more people than it helped? But then I looked at Serena, her face lined with guilt and fear, and I knew he wasn't protecting anyone but himself. Ryan didn't wait for another word. He reached into his bag, yanked out his phone, and hit a button. A small red light blinked on the laptop screen. "It's already uploading," he said. "The files are going public right now." The CEO's expression shattered. "You idiot!" he shouted, lunging toward Ryan. Everything happened in seconds. The laptop hit the ground, the screen cracking, and the flash drive snapped free. I grabbed it and backed away as the CEO swung at Ryan, sending papers and dust flying into the air. "Stop!" Serena yelled, stepping between them. "You don't understand. If this goes live, the entire board will come after you. They'll..." Her voice cut off when the building's overhead lights suddenly flickered again. Then, somewhere outside, the sound of sirens grew louder. The police. Maybe Ryan had called them earlier, or maybe someone nearby had heard the shouting. Whatever it was, the sound changed everything. The CEO froze, glancing toward the windows. His arrogance started to crumble into panic. "You think this will save you?" he said, his voice cracking slightly. "You'll never prove who did what. The board will deny everything. You'll just look like bitter employees trying to ruin a company's future." But Serena stepped forward now, her tone firm, steady. "Not this time. I kept copies too, ones with your name on every transaction. Offshore accounts, wire transfers, all of it. I made sure your fingerprints were everywhere." The CEO's eyes widened. "You what? You think I didn't see what you were doing to everyone," she said. "I played your game because I had no choice, but I wasn't going down with you." For the first time, I saw who Serena really was. Not a manipulator, not just someone caught in the middle, but a survivor who'd been playing her own dangerous hand the whole time. The sirens were closer now, flashing red and blue against the broken windows. The CEO turned toward the door, ready to bolt, but Ryan stepped in his way. "It's over," he said quietly. The CEO looked at all of us, breathing hard. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "You don't understand. If this gets out, it won't stop with me. You're exposing something that reaches higher than any of us. You think the board is the top? They're not." The words hit like a thunderclap. I could tell he wasn't bluffing this time. His eyes held a kind of desperate truth. "There's another company," he said. "A holding group that owns everything. They funded the IPO, they planted the story, they control the regulators. If you take me down, they'll just erase me and replace me with someone else. You'll never even find their names." Before anyone could respond, the building doors burst open. Police shouted commands, flashlights cutting through the dust. The CEO raised his hand slowly, his face blank now, all emotion gone. As they led him away, he glanced back at us one last time. "You didn't win," he said softly. "You just woke something up." The words echoed even after he was gone. By the time the police finished taking statements, the sky outside was streaked with early light. Ryan's upload had gone through. Every document, every transaction, every hidden file. News outlets were already calling it the most shocking corporate scandal in years. The IPO collapsed within hours, the company's stock frozen before trading could even begin. I thought that would be the end of it. That maybe, after everything, the truth would finally set things right. But life rarely works that neatly. 2 days later, Ryan called me. His voice was uneasy. "There's something weird," he said. "The company's gone dark. Servers wiped, executives missing. And guess what? The holding group he mentioned, it doesn't officially exist. It's like the entire trail just vanished." I felt a cold shiver run through me. "What about the files?" "They're online," he said. "But some of the biggest ones disappeared overnight. Someone's covering the gaps fast. It's like they're rewriting history in real time." As we talked, my phone buzzed with a new email. No subject line, no name. Just like before. I opened it slowly, and there was only one sentence inside. "You did the right thing, but it's not over." I stared at it, unsure whether it was a warning or reassurance. A week later, Serena reached out. She'd left the country, started somewhere new, away from all the noise. She said she didn't regret exposing the truth, but she also warned me to stay alert. "The people behind this aren't done," she said. "The money you saw, that was just one doorway. There are dozens more." Her voice carried that same quiet strength as before. I believed her. As the months passed, investigations spread, names surfaced, and lawsuits began. The CEO faced trial, and the media tore the company apart. But even as the headlines exploded, there was still that lingering shadow, the part no one could prove, the invisible hands pulling the strings from behind closed doors. Sometimes I'd catch myself wondering if any of it had truly made a difference. Sure, I'd exposed corruption, but at what cost? My job was gone, my savings nearly wiped, and my life turned upside down. But then I'd see the messages from people online, whistleblowers, employees, even strangers, thanking me for speaking up. And maybe that was enough. One night, months later, I got another message. It came from an unknown number. No threats this time. Just a simple line. "The next IPO is coming. You should pay attention." I sat there for a long time, staring at those words. It felt like a warning and an invitation. Maybe the fight wasn't over. Maybe it was just beginning again. Somewhere else. Under another name. Another company. Another billion-dollar dream built on lies. I closed my laptop and looked out the window. The city lights flickered below, cold and distant, the same way they did that night I lost my job. Only now I understood what those lights really hid, the quiet hum of power, money, and secrets moving behind the scenes. The truth had come out once, but deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before another story like mine began. And maybe, when it did, I'd be ready to tell it again. Because the real fight isn't just about one company or one CEO, it's about the system that lets people like them rise, fall, and rebuild as if nothing happened. And as long as that system exists, the story never really ends. Not for them, and not for me. In the weeks that followed, life felt strangely quiet. The chaos that had once filled every hour, the messages, the threats, the rush to uncover the truth, was suddenly gone. The company that had been worth billions had collapsed overnight, and the world had already moved on to the next big scandal. News anchors debated numbers and shareholders, but none of them really knew what it felt like from the inside. They didn't know the sleepless nights, the fear, the weight of losing everything just to do the right thing. I moved into a small apartment far from the city. It wasn't much, just a space where I could breathe again. The noise of corporate boardrooms and constant stress was replaced with the sound of traffic outside and the hum of a ceiling fan. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. But even in that calm, the memories still found me. Sometimes I'd wake up before dawn and replay the final moments in that abandoned building. The CEO's eyes when he realized he'd lost control, Serena's trembling voice as she turned on him, Ryan's determination as he hit that upload button. It all felt like a movie I'd lived through but could never forget. Ryan stayed in journalism. His report on the scandal went viral and was picked up by major outlets. He didn't become famous exactly, but people started to notice him. He told me once, "You know, Stories like this don't end, they just go quiet for a while. I believed him. Every time another IPO hit the headlines, I wondered how much truth was hidden beneath it. As for Serena, she kept her word. Before she disappeared, she sent me one last message. I'm free now. Don't come looking for me. Just live. It wasn't closure, not really, but it was enough. Part of me still thought about her sometimes, how someone could be both part of the problem and the solution, how she found her way out when everyone else was trapped. Maybe she'd earned that freedom. Maybe we all had, in our own way. The company's name became a symbol of greed and failure. Documentaries were made, podcasts launched, books written by people who'd never even stepped inside the building. Everyone wanted to talk about the $1.3 billion IPO that collapsed. But no one really talked about the people who lost their livelihoods when it happened. The engineers, the assistants, the interns, people who had nothing to do with the lies but still paid the price. I saw some of them again during an informal gathering months later. It was strange, seeing everyone outside that toxic environment. We weren't talking about deadlines or bonuses anymore. We were talking about what came next. Most had found new jobs, smaller ones, less glamorous but more stable. One of them said, I used to think success meant working for a billion-dollar company. Now I just want to work for one that tells the truth. Everyone nodded. It was quiet for a moment, but it felt like understanding passed between us. We had all learned something the hard way. As for me, I didn't go back to corporate life. I couldn't. I started consulting for small startups instead, helping them build ethical systems, transparent reporting, fair pay structures, things that sound simple but are so often ignored. It didn't pay nearly as much as before, but it gave me something better, peace. Sometimes reporters reached out asking for interviews, hoping I'd share every detail about the scandal, maybe even name names that hadn't gone public. But I always declined, not because I was afraid, but because I knew the story had already done its job. People had seen what unchecked power and greed could do. Dragging it out further wouldn't change what had already happened. The truth was out, and that was enough. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that the CEO's final words carried some truth. The deeper system he warned about, it wasn't gone. It just shifted, adapted, found new ways to hide. Power always does. But maybe what scared them most wasn't exposure. It was that people like me, like Ryan, like Serena, were no longer willing to stay silent. That's how real change starts. Not in boardrooms or courtrooms, but with ordinary people who decide they've had enough. Months later, when everything seemed settled, I received another email from an anonymous address. It said, new company, same people, different name. Attached was a single document, an internal memo for a tech firm about to go public, filled with eerily familiar numbers and strategies. My stomach tightened. For a moment, I thought about diving back in, about uncovering another layer of corruption. But then I closed the laptop and sat still for a long time. I realized something important that night. You can't fight every battle alone. Exposing the truth once had nearly cost me everything. But maybe this time, I didn't have to do it by myself. So instead of replying, I forwarded the email to Ryan. I knew he'd know what to do. The next morning, he called me. You saw it too? He asked. Yeah, I said quietly. It never really ends, does it? He laughed softly. No. But at least now we know where to look. That conversation stayed with me. It reminded me that fighting corruption isn't a one-time act. It's a choice you keep making, every day in small ways. Refusing to stay quiet when something feels wrong. Standing up even when it's inconvenient. Because sometimes, that's all it takes to make a difference. As the months turned into a year, the noise around the scandal faded. New companies rose, new headlines took over, and people slowly forgot. But I didn't. Not because of the loss or the fear, but because of what it taught me about people, how easily power can twist them, and how courage, even from one voice, can bring down something built on lies. Whenever I looked at my reduced salary statements, I remembered where it all began. How a pay cut of $3,200 had set off a chain of events that exposed a billion-dollar fraud. At the time, it felt like punishment, but now I saw it differently. That pay cut had been the start of my freedom, the first push toward something real. Sometimes life strips away what you think you need, so you can find what truly matters. Now, when I tell this story, I don't talk about revenge or regret. I talk about choices, about how integrity doesn't come with applause, but it always comes with peace. About how one person's refusal to look the other way can ripple further than they ever imagine. The scandal became a case study in business schools, a warning in corporate seminars. But to me, it was something simpler, a reminder that truth always finds a way to surface, even when people try to bury it under billions. And as I sit by my window at night, watching the city lights, I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I just stayed quiet that first day. If I'd trained Serena, collected my paycheck, and pretended everything was fine. Maybe I'd still have that job, that comfort, but I wouldn't have myself. In the end, that's what this whole story is about. Not the money, not the scandal, not even the $1.3 billion IPO that crumbled. It's about what you're willing to lose to keep your soul intact. Because sometimes, the biggest reward isn't wealth or recognition. It's being able to look at yourself and know you didn't bend when it mattered most. The truth cost me a lot, but it gave me something money never could: peace of mind. And that's a salary that no company can ever take away again.